Hey guys, this is Jess. I make my living traveling around the world, shooting photos and telling stories about anglers. I'm a Montana kid, born and raised, and want you to join Mandela and I as we talk about how to deal with this influx of people that are now going to be on our waters this summer, why that's a bad thing and a good thing, and how we can encourage folks to take better care of our resources. And as a bonus, we talk about how to get your friends into fishing.
Hello listeners, Mandela here. I'm excited to announce that I've been in the recording studio, working on an album with my good friend, Steve Saroff. We just released our first single, and you can support our music by simply adding this song to your playlist on Spotify or Apple Music. To find our music, search for Didgeridoo River Meditation under the artist name Mandela van Eden.
Hi folks, my name is Chris and I'm the artist and co-founder at Explorer Maps. My brother Greg and I produced our first map about 11 years ago, doing the map of Montana, and our list of maps has grown from 1 to our current tally of over 65.
Which map will you get to help you treasure your own special times? Please be sure to use the promo code Mandela for a discount when you visit explorermaps.com.
Welcome to the Trail Less Traveled, an adventure radio series and podcast dedicated to collecting stories and sounds from around the world in order to take you back to mankind's earliest form of entertainment, storytelling. This episode was recorded on location in collaboration with Explorer Maps. Missoula, Montana is a mecca for outdoor enthusiasts, and each week we will bring you tales of adventure from both near and far, as well as information and inspiration and a few tunes to set the mood. You can subscribe to the podcast and learn about our international outreach projects at traillesstraveled.net. And now, here's your host, international expedition guide, conservationist, and yogi, Mandela.
We're sitting on the edge of the Clark Fork River. I'm sitting here with Jess McGlothlin. She is a career fly fishing and travel journalist and photographer. She was born in Colombia Falls, raised in Montana. Jess has also worked as a fly fishing guide and instructor. I'm just so grateful to be sitting with you on the edge of the river here in the spring in Montana. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, we're lucky today. We have a nice, very Montana, sunny, rainy, cloudy spring day.
And it's just so beautiful that just upstream of us, if you look, we've got two anglers enjoying the river before the spring runoff comes down. Jess, I just want to go ahead and get started by asking you, where did you grow up? And how was adventure a part of your childhood?
That's a great question. I was very lucky to grow up just about 2.5 hours north of here in Colombia Falls. So the Flathead Valley, it's fantastic outdoor space, and grew up fishing. I think some of my earliest childhood memories were I had a pink, probably a Barbie rod at one point. My first really salient childhood memory was sitting under the casting deck of our family's drift boat during a thunderstorm and piling up blankets to build a fort, because my fort was magically going to, be a safe little corner as we floated down through this storm. So I had parents who got me out very early and made sure that the outdoors, fishing and a little bit of just hunting and hiking and camping were an integral part of, for both myself and my brother, who he also still lives here in Montana. You learn how to appreciate those outdoor spaces, and I think what they do for you physically and mentally at a young age. And I grew up enjoying that. I actually got away from fishing in my teens. I was a horse girl, as many of us Montana girls are. Did the high school rodeo thing for a while and eventually turned to the English side of the horse world and got a job at 17 that took me over to Europe. So I packed my bags, was working in the horse industry in Europe, riding horses for young stallion auctions in Sweden, which for a Montana kid, the idea of driving a European stick shift car through a big roundabout was utterly terrifying. I wanted my Ford F-350 with my horse trailer, but the European world was a big culture shock, and I think a very good one. So packed up, went over there, had planned a career in the equestrian industry, and saw a bit of kind of the deep dark in that industry and the money it takes and the politics, and decided it wasn't for me. So came back to the States and started from scratch. Kind of said, okay, what do I love? What makes me feel excited? What am I passionate about? Fishing, of course, surfaced. Being outdoors surfaced. I had always written. I think as a child, my first published story was in Highlights magazine, which I hope is still around. I don't know if it is, but I'm hopeful. And started writing. I got a lead on a story. They wanted to put a hydroelectric dam near Quake Lake, right near West Yellowstone, which is just a storied, fantastic Montana lake with a really interesting history. And I think I was 19 at the time and got probably somewhat self-righteously pissed off and said, I'm going to write this story. I'm going to go get the interview and write it and break the news and make people aware. And did it. I got an interview. I think no one else could get the interview with the kind of project developer. I think he found me amusing as a 19-year-old girl. He was like, sure, whatever. We'll meet at a coffee shop. We got the meeting. I got him on record and wrote the article, which was later then used in court to help turn the project down. So that was really eye-opening for me as a writer to say, I can help protect these spaces and these places that I love while also writing, which is something else that I love. It was a really interesting combination. And then picking up a camera, that same article, the Quake Lake article, I pitched it to a lot of magazines before it was published. Finally, one bit, he wanted to run it but would not publish the piece unless I had photo evidence of the site. At that point, I was working 3 jobs, very broke. I think I was training horses, selling fishing licenses and hunting licenses at Sportsman's Warehouse, and selling lingerie at Victoria's Secret. So I had all my bases covered. And my food budget per month, I think, was about $100. I was hand to mouth. And so I sliced my food budget. I sliced all my ancillary expenses, saved up, bought a camera, got the photos, and then that article ran. So that also was interesting to see how, okay, fishing and writing can come together, and then I add photography in, and that's a really powerful way to tell a story, is to capture the visual, capture the written word, and combine those pieces in a way that hopefully can influence some change and maybe present something to people that they care about, or they could come to care about. And from there, it just spiraled tends to have a negative connotation, but things just kind of spiraled and sprinted. And I've been lucky enough to go tell fishing and travel stories on 6 continents all around the world, and still working on fishing in Antarctica. I haven't figured that one out yet, but it's a great way to travel and a great way to meet like-minded people. I think fishermen all around the world like the same thing. It's a very universal language and tends to draw really good people.
Jess, I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about the seeds of conservation that, were just starting to blossom when you were little, and your parents and maybe some of their involvement with it, and just how you found yourself in the realm of working in fishing, education, and conservation.
Absolutely. I think indirectly, some of it probably stems from my mother. She was a career teacher, high school French and Spanish teacher. So I would go as a young kid and watch her teach her high school students and just how she interacted with them. If she was teaching groceries, she would pack them up and take them to a grocery store and hand them a list written in French and say, okay, find the groceries, good luck. And so that was really a good way to get interesting, immersive teaching ideas planted in my brain, I guess. I still believe that's the best way to learn. And then I think just being out in it, growing up, like I said earlier, you appreciate things that have an impact in your life and that shape the way you think and the way you act and shape how you physically interact with the world. I think outdoorsmen tend to move differently as a rule of thumb. People who spend time outdoors we carry ourselves differently. We have a different mindset on the world. And so all that builds into these building blocks that then shape an individual. And that influences everything from relationships to professional career to how you travel. I think people who are outdoors, men and women, often make better travelers. It's not a hard rule of thumb, but we learn how to pivot and adapt very early on. I think that pivoting and adapting has been a really crucial piece in conservation in the past decade or so, and will probably continue to be more so in the future as people become much more aware of, okay, how do I protect what I care about? Maybe I was ignorant of it as a child. It seems like that is much more of a thought process for people now, even in the past 10 years, of this kind of cognizance, this recognition of, okay, I appreciate being able to go out on the Clark Fork after work. Like, we're sitting here right now, 5-minute drive from town, and we can see cars over there, and there are people fishing here, and there's, there are buildings across the river. How does this all impact this ecosystem? Because people come here, we appreciate being able to come here, but then how do we ensure it's around for the next generation? It's a special thing. And I think that translates here in Montana. I certainly see it abroad as well. I've been lucky enough to go help open up some exploratory fisheries around the world, in French Polynesia and some in Africa, and basically going in and checking out fisheries to see, okay, could a tourism operator then bring in tourists here, sports fishermen and women, to fish and enjoy the place without having a negative impact on the society, the place itself, and then the fishery and the fish itself. And that's something that it seems to be really picking up steam in the fishing industry, is how do we keep exploring? How do we keep finding these special places but not ruining them? How do we make sure they're going to be around, and this potential tourist business coming in could be really beneficial for the locals who are already there? I could talk on this all day. There's a lot in the fisheries world, which is exciting, all around the world. And we're lucky here in Montana, we are kind of in the thick of it. I mean, Montana is idyllic trout fishing country, and for many, if you want to fish trout, this is the place to come, and for good reason.
Well, Jess, I feel like that's a can of worms, but we're here on the water, and I would like to open up that can of worms and talk to you about some of the work that you've done in the many countries that you've visited around the world in regards to fishing and conservation.
One of my favorite projects that I was able to go on, and I think is really kind of symbolic of many others we're seeing crop up, in 2015, I went down with Costa Sunglasses, a sunglasses manufacturer who is really active in conservation, and then a group called IndieFly. And IndieFly's premise is they come into places that have no tourism industry and potentially a really good sport fishery. And they come in, work with local tribes or villages, whoever happens to be around, and see if we can bring in small groups of anglers, see if we can establish infrastructure enough to bring in sport anglers and have them enjoy these fisheries while contributing to these places, and not negatively impacting the community as well. And the place we went with Costa and IndieFly was a little atoll called Anaa, A-N-A-A, in French Polynesia. Fantastic people. There's probably about 80 people who live year-round on this atoll. No schools beyond what we would consider grade school. It's sustenance living. They eat coconuts and raw bonefish most of the time. And occasionally we'll get some hard goods and odds and ends, but it's very much kind of what we would imagine Robinson Crusoe-esque living. Living by the sun, living by the tides. And it sounds really poetic. It sounds wonderful, except for this generation coming up who are in their late teens, early 20s, and realizing that, wow, in this day and age, I can't make the living that my parents made on this atoll. It's becoming a much smaller world, as we all know. And they're feeling pressed. They're trying to figure out, okay, do I fly to French Polynesia, to Tahiti, to the main island, and get a job in the city? But they don't want to leave their family. They don't want to leave the atoll they love. But there's really no source of income on the island other than fish, which they then sell to other locals, or harvesting copra, all the coconut byproducts that they can get. And they will ship those out, but it's a tough living. And so we were able to go in, a group of folks from Costa, from IndieFly, and then a couple Australians who are professionals on the fly fishing tourism side, flew in, worked with the villagers, and kind of assessed, one, is the fishery good enough to start bringing people in? Because as a tourist, it's not cheap to fly into a place like that. Want to make sure it's worth people's while. And two, can we do that in a way that won't negatively impact the fishery and won't ruin this incredible culture and the incredible way of life these folks have? And over the course of many, many years, we've been able to actually implement a program that works on a very small scale. I mean, we're talking maybe over the course of a year, 15 people max come in. And that could be two groups. That could be two groups. One group, if 15 people came, a lot would be sleeping on the beach because there's just not the infrastructure there. And I think it's a wonderful example of we're now providing income to a place that really there were very little sources of income for the locals. And this next generation is able to stay on the island and learn how to be a fishing guide or learn how to work in the tourism industry. And the scale is very small, but we're seeing it's extremely impactful in a really positive way for the folks who are involved. And raising awareness for this incredible fishery and this place that for many anglers, it is a bucket list trip. Truly, you're fishing for species there that we see on the cover of magazines, and we as anglers only dream about getting into a giant trevally or a Napoleon wrasse, all these alien looking fish they call this place home, and we get to come visit for a week. It's really an incredible thing.
Jess, because this is a podcast, this is a radio show, could you please take a moment to paint the picture for the listener? Look around. Where are you sitting right now? What do you see? What do you hear? Can you transport the listener with us here today by the water?
I will do my best. It's hard to capture all this into words, I think, even for a writer. We're finally getting the spring days that we've all been hoping for here in Missoula. You can hear the river in the background. We've been hearing geese fly overhead. And as we've been having these discussions, I find it really hard to pull my eyes off the water. I'm very hopeful I'll start seeing some trout noses popping up. Haven't seen any yet, but we can't be that far off. I'm hearing rumors of squallows down the valley. So spring is here. I think after this long, kind of dark winter, we're all pretty ready for it.
Beautiful. Jess, I would like to talk to you now about what you see as an angler as the most pressing conservation issue that you've experienced firsthand.
There are so many that we're dealing with right now. One that really strikes home here in Montana, very much for me because Montana is home, but also for the many folks who are now calling Montana home, who weren't a year ago, is the big influx of people we're seeing. I mean, as we sit here, we're overlooking Missoula in the distance, mountains in the distance. There's a lot more people residing in that valley between us and those mountains right now than there were a year ago. Certainly more than there were 5 years ago. And people move here for a reason. They love to be outdoors. They want to be able to go do exactly what we're doing. After the workday, come sit by the river, bring dinner, have a beer, go fishing. People move here to hunt and backpack and hike and bike. But all that comes with an opportunity cost for the resources, because as many people as come in and are added into the list of folks who enjoy these resources, the resources aren't multiplying on an equal rate. The Bitterroot isn't now suddenly 2 rivers. The Clark Fork is still going to have probably about the same amount of water as it did last year. Hopefully a little bit more. We'll see what snowpack does for us. So I think it's really important for us, especially as anglers. We see this a lot. Our summers are hot right now. We're in this swing of really warm, hot summers, smoky summers. That's stressful for fish. Being handled and caught is obviously stressful for fish. And just having people around. We have a lot more people around. I grew up about 2.5 hours north of here. And Montana at that point, you could get into corners that still felt pretty wild. Luckily, you still can. If you put the effort in, you can get away and find some quiet, wild spaces in Montana. But many of those boat ramps that I, as a 8-year-old, would struggle to back the family drift boat down, where there would be 2 cars there, now there's going to be 30. And so that does change the experience for the next 8-year-old who's learning to back a boat down a ramp. And also for the fish and for the resources. So I think, long story short, as we see more bodies on rivers across the West and honestly across the U.S. and the globe as a whole, we just have more people around the world. Being careful with how we treat our resources and being cognizant is of greater importance than it ever was before.
What gives you hope?
In a strange way, kind of the same thing. We have more people moving to Montana. As a Montanan, I hate to say there's anything positive about this influx of folks, but there is. People move here for a reason. They move here because they love the outdoors and they want to experience it. And that, first off, gives me hope in humanity. As long as people can keep that hope and that appreciation for outdoor spaces, that gives me hope on a very grand scale that things are going to be okay. We have our priorities right. And there are still people who can step back from the computer, from the TV, put the phone down, and get outside and experience it and hopefully appreciate that. And I think hand in hand with that, yes, it's more people on the river, but at the same time, that's also more voices fighting for the river and the place. So that's, it's a cart and horse thing. There's a negative and a positive to everything in life. But I think we can look at this in 2 ways. We can sit back and go, oh no, there are so many people, I'm angry all the time, life is terrible. Or say, all right, there are a few more people on the trail, my boat ramp's a little bit more crowded, but when the river cleanup comes around come spring, that's maybe a couple more guys who are going to help us clean up the river.
So Jess, as you were speaking, an insect landed on your hand and another one was crawling on your leg, and I feel like as a fly fisherwoman, you probably are taking notice of who's interacting in the world around you.
Yes.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about being an instructor and the perceived barriers to learning in terms of a beginner angler.
Absolutely. No, there are many. I use the term barriers to entry a lot because there are many. Fly anglers tend to view fishing very much as part of their identity. If you're in an airport and you see a guy carrying a rod case and you start talking to him, he's not going to say, my name's Bob, I'm from LA and I work in the movies, or whatever it is. He's going to say, my name's Bob and I fish. I'm going to Montana to fish. That's who Bob identifies as. He's probably got a fishing baseball cap on and all the gear. And so it's a very passionate group of folks. I think with that passion comes a little ego. Everyone likes to play smoke and mirrors a little bit and make things seem really difficult. And yes, fishing is nuanced. There's so many different sub-worlds. We have fresh, we have salt, we have the two-handed salmon steelhead world. We have international fishing. There are almost countless little subsects of fly fishing as a whole. But by far the best, most accomplished anglers that I know around the world are the ones who are bringing more people into the sport. And they can step back and boil it down to the very basics. I tell people at the end of the day, we have a stick and a string and a hook with either yarn or a bunch of feathers on the end. I don't care if it's fresh or salt or what, but don't make it complicated. I love taking people out who have never held a rod before. I work kind of part-time as a fishing director at a lodge in Belize. And we'll go down. Part of that involves managing the guide team and making sure everyone's staying safe and abiding by the rules. But also a big part of that is meeting anglers every night as they come back to the lodge and doing casting lessons. And I love it. Often we'll get, Bob from LA who's a fly fisherman. That's who he is. But Bob's wife comes along and she sees a woman out there teaching all the guys to fish, or giving casting lessons. And suddenly, for the first time, she wants to pick up a fly rod and try it. And she probably has a cocktail in one hand and brings it out to the dock and we cast. And these women have been and guys, it can be, guys who are not fishing, staying at the lodge, whoever. These anglers have been so kind of mentally freaked out by the fact that fishing ostensibly is so hard, they haven't wanted to try it. And you put them in an environment where they've maybe had a cocktail, they can relax, and they're on vacation, life is good, who cares, and give them a rod, and suddenly they start having fun. And so you kind of take away that worry of oh no, I'm going to look dumb. Oh no, it's really hard. And just give people a stick and a string and let them play. And they find it's really enjoyable. I find folks who do yoga often really generate or gather towards fishing because it is kind of a moving meditation. Rock climbers, same thing. It's very rhythmic, a metronome tone often. So it's a great way to relax. It goes the other way. We see all the fishing videos that are set to rock music that are very intense, and that's a fun part of it too. But especially here around Montana, we're so lucky to have small creeks and streams where if you've never held a fly rod, go with a friend who has. Walk into a shop. I know it's intimidating, but most fly shops, it's gotten much better over the last decade. Most fly shops, if you go in and don't posture, instead say, hey, I'm new, I want to learn, they'll set you up. They probably have a guide who specializes in first-time trips, or they'll at least tell you, like, hey, here's the gear you need, try going here. They're not going to give you their best fishing spots, but they'll send you in the right direction. And the worst thing is, you go out, try it, decide you don't like it, and you never do it again. But I think there's something really powerful in trying new things, be it fishing or anything else in life. We live in a place with so many good waters. Why not give it a try?
Jess, I'd like to thank you for inspiring so many future anglers, because in itself, that's a conservation issue. The fact that we are having less hunters and anglers on the landscape. And as you know, hunters and anglers are phenomenal conservationists.
Absolutely.
I feel like we can sometimes be overwhelmed by all of the things that we can do, for wildlife conservation. There is so much. You can't do it all necessarily. One thing you can do is invite someone to go fishing with you, I feel.
Absolutely. And I think you're exactly right. Fishermen and hunters we're stewards of the landscape, because exactly like we were talking about a minute ago, we care about these places. And there's a reason that if you sit down with a hunter who's hunted much of his life, he's going to be able to speak far more eloquently on hunting conservation than I could, than many other people could, because that's his resource that he cares about and he wants to ensure it's around. Same thing for anglers. We really want to invest, for lack of a better word, in these places.
On the subject of investing in these places and talking about the place where we're sitting right now on the edge of the river, more people are moving into places like Missoula, but like you said earlier, that doesn't mean that the resource is also doubling. So I would like to know specifically what you think hunters and anglers can do about this.
It's a great question, and I think a very loaded question. One thing for me as an angler, one of the most basic things is treating the fish right. Many people have seen bumper stickers around town or seen on social media a hashtag, keep fish wet. And it sounds kind of silly at first. Like, yeah, fish, they're in the water. Of course they're wet. But then scroll through your Instagram feed and you'll probably see photos of anglers with a fish on the bank, a bank just like we're sitting on. I'm sure this bank has seen many fish drug up on it. Or people in a boat holding a fish up. That fish looks kind of tacky and dry. You know how a healthy fish skin is nice. They have a slime layer. They look sleek and healthy and slick. And you can always tell if a fish has been out of the water because they have that dull, tacky look to them. So I think one thing as we head into what will inevitably be another hot, hopefully not as smoky summer, we'll see what we get, is being really cognizant of how you're handling fish. Once water temperatures get warm, which anymore in Montana, once we hit July, mid-July, I'm not touching fish. I'll bring a fish to hand. If I'm waiting, grab the line, grab the leader, grab the end of the line for those who don't fish, bring the fish kind of to my feet, around my legs in the little swirl of water provided by my legs, and reach my hand into the water and just flip the hook out of its mouth. I never cradle the fish with my hand and lift it out of the water because that fish just doesn't need it. He's probably seen a lot of fishing pressure already through the summer, and water's hot. He's not very happy. Water also is... as it drops, there's less oxygen often flowing through the water. So it's a stressful environment for fish. So if we can help them be released more healthily and able to kind of recover quickly and swim away, they'll exist, we hope, to be caught again by another angler and continue to be a part of the resource. If you're fishing in a boat, it's harder. I do hosted trips in Montana in the summer occasionally, and my rule of thumb, luckily I work with a group of guides up on the Missouri River who are all on the same page. Once water temperatures get warm, it's pretty much all fishing from drift boats. So clients, of course, want to lift the fish into the boat, get a great picture, grip and grin. It doesn't happen. Then the guides will put their foot down and say, no, look, temps are hot, fish are stressed. We're already fishing in the morning when water temperatures have cooled throughout the night and are off the water by like 2. But they'll just say, lean over the side of the boat and point your camera down into the net if you want a picture, but you're not going to touch the fish. And so I really would encourage guides, and I'm seeing this improve throughout Montana a lot in the past decade. Don't be afraid to put your foot down with clients, and even friends who are taking other friends fishing. Don't be afraid to say, like, guys, no, we don't need the grip and grin. Hero shots. I'm a photographer. I'm a fishing photographer, so it probably sounds kind of strange for me to say this, but anymore I will not send a magazine a fish photo if the fish is out of the water, unless it's dripping. Often with anglers, if water temperatures are good, conditions are good, the fish are healthy and strong, I'll tell the angler, I'll position myself as a photographer in front of an angler who has his fish in the water, and I'll count down from 3 and say, okay, on the count of 3, you're going to lift the fish out of the water, you count to 3, and then that fish goes in again. Or I'll tell him, hey, hold your breath. Because as soon as that fish is out of the water, he's essentially holding his breath. He's not breathing. So setting the shot up, if you are going to get a hero shot, work with your angler. Tell them, okay, I want you here. Count of 3, you're going to lift that fish up. You're going to hold your breath. Count to 3, and then that fish is back in the water. And it's probably for the past 4 years, I've not sent a photo to... probably more than 4 years, not send a photo to a magazine of a fish that is A, out of the water, or B, not dripping, visibly dripping, which makes for better photos. We want that fish healthy. Who doesn't like the shot of like water dripping, cascading off a fish? It makes for much more compelling photography. So it's a win-win for the photograph, as well as the fish, as well as the angler. And I think at the end of the day, those seem like really small steps. It's one fish that Bob caught that one day. We let it go, it was healthy, but guess what? That one fish might get caught 5 days a week through the season. And the kid who catches it next week, it could be his first good trout of the season. So that fish can go on, A, to have a healthy existence until he meets a natural end. Who knows? But it also is making the experience and making memories for anglers down the way. So it's a simple thing, but many-faceted, I think. Keep Fish Wet does fantastic work. They're an organization that's throughout the U.S. They actually do some work abroad. They've been doing some excellent work in the Seychelles, in the Indian Ocean. So if you are a fisheries nerd like I am, or if you just want to learn how to better handle fish here in Montana through the season, keepfishwet.org. They have a great Instagram as well that's worth a follow, and really is a good source of inspiration for how to get those good fish photographs.
Beautiful. On that note, I encourage whoever's listening out there to nerd out and research the slime that protects fish. So the next time you're in the presence of an ichthyologist, ask them about that slime and all of the benefits that it provides for the fish. Because when you learn about them, you're going to probably want a coat of slime on yourself as well.
Absolutely.
And the more we handle the fish, the more it affects that slime, which will, at the end of the day, protect them.
Absolutely. And one thing, while we do still have a couple cool days coming up, gloves. If an angler handles a fish wearing gloves, it peels that slime right off. So if you catch fish in cold weather, take your gloves off first before touching the fish. And even handling fish during the summer, dip your hands in the water first. You don't want dry hands on wet tacky fish.
Yeah, and being mindful of the net that you're using as well, hey?
Absolutely. There's a lot that goes into it. As simple and beautifully simple as fishing can be, there are a lot of factors that go into really protecting these fish.
Hi folks, my name is Chris and I'm the artist and co-founder at Explorer Maps. My brother Greg and I produced our first map about 11 years ago, doing the map of Montana, and our list of maps has grown from 1 to our current tally of over 65. I've been drawing and painting for a long, long time, starting as an advertising illustrator in the 80s back in Canada, to exhibiting wildlife and landscape oil paintings in East Africa through the 1990s. But I find that what I'm doing now with Explorer is the most rewarding project I've ever been involved with, mostly because it's a family business, and helping to grow that business gives me a real sense of purpose. We've even got our daughter Becca in on the action, making short documentaries and videos. She's just done one of Costa Rica. And my wife Ness will be finding new markets for our Explorer products when we move back to Kenya in the summer. So that'll be great fun. On the topic of connecting people in place, hopefully these maps bring back memories of great holidays and fun with family and friends. And it makes people want to get out there and connect or reconnect with these places. Do I have a favorite map? I definitely do not have a favorite map. They're all my favorites because they're like my children. I love them all equally. How's that for a diplomatic answer? Anyway, thanks for listening.
Hi, this is Vanessa, Chris's wife. Which map will you get to help you treasure your own special times? Please be sure to use the promo code Mandela for a discount when you visit explorermaps.com.
I think one of my most profound experiences, maybe profound learning experiences in the fishing world around water, is very loosely related to fishing. About 5 years ago, I was on a shoot, big commercial shoot, with an Australian and a couple local guys in Samoa. And we were doing offshore fishing. Samoa is not known for its fly fishing. It, as we learned once we had boots on the ground, is a very large commercial fishing ground. So there's not a huge opportunity there for fly anglers. But we were there. We thought, why not? We're going to try this. It was one of those shoots where everything went wrong. I came away with dengue at the end of the shoot. All of us got sick with other things during the shoot. We had one of our anglers coming in, was detained coming from Australia. They stopped in New Zealand. He was stopped in New Zealand and allowed to go no further. Don't pass go, don't collect 200, don't go to your destination. And so the shoot as a whole was a really interesting experience, and we're in this beautiful place, we're fishing, life's supposed to be fun and tropical beaches and drinks, relaxing. That was not the case, so it was a rough week. And the first day of the shoot, before much of this had happened, we were in the Apalima Strait, which divides the two islands of Samoa. Gorgeous, deep strait, tropical water. It was a bit of a stormy day, not necessarily the postcard days that we dream of in the South Pacific. And I was in the water with my underwater housing. I have basically a big blue plastic box with a domed lens on the front that I can put my DSLR in and jump in the water and shoot with it. It's a great tool. Customs hates it. Every time I fly internationally, they think I'm smuggling something nefarious. But was in the water shooting back towards the boat where the guys were fishing. Beautiful little island in the back. It's lush, it's green. I'm focusing on lining up the shot. I made the very naive mistake of grabbing my fins, putting on my fins before I went in the water, but not taking my mask. Just thinking, okay, it's hot, I'm gonna go for a nice swim, I don't really need my mask. Typically when I'm in blue water, I like to put on a mask so I can dip my head in the water and just peek around at what's going on underneath me now and then, which is the mature, smart thing to do. I was not being either of those things on this day. And shot a few frames, moved around a bit, shot a few more frames, and then suddenly the water underneath me kind of eddied funny. And we're in the middle of this big strait, and it took me a minute. I thought, well, wait, I shouldn't be feeling like a river eddy around this water underneath me. I feel it again, and then something comes up from underneath me and shoves me. Basically, I get kind of this big push, I twirl a little bit, and immediately tip the camera down and hold the shutter, thinking, oh, if I'm going to die, I want photos of whatever's about to eat me. It was terrible. We have these, in really dire moments, these weird moments of clarity of like, oh, what will the newspaper headline read like? Or I hope the camera does float. So if I went down, they at least could retrieve the camera and get the photos. But look down and see a big dark shape in the water with me, which is not necessarily what you want to see when you're out there. And my leg's a little sore. It had been abraded by whatever had bumped against me, and had a panicked moment of, okay, do I dump the camera, swim for the boat really quickly? Luckily in Montana, we grew up around bears and other things that are predators in the wilderness, so I had very little knowledge of what to do in blue water, but thought, okay, if it's a bear, I'm not going to run. So I'll just kind of calmly try and ooch my way over to the boat. This big dark shape comes up again, and this time I get pushed a little bit differently and hear a big, scraping noise, a big gronch. And the shark, turned out to be a tiger shark, had mouthed the underwater housing. And my housing now, my blue box, has teeth marks in it. So I'm keeping that housing until it dies. There'll be no selling that piece of equipment because it's got this little scar that has a great story. But the shark just came and mouthed it. And it was a big shark. It seemed like Jaws when I was in the water with it. It really wasn't Jaws size, but it was a good sized shark. And she came and mouthed the box and then swam away. And at that point, the guys on the boat had noticed that something was in the water with me and were yelling. And I don't remember really getting back to the boat and getting in the boat. It happened. I was fine. I had some abrasions on my leg, but ran into, conveniently the next day in Apia, in town, there was a NOAA shark research vessel, an Oceries kind of research vessel with shark guys on board, and showed him the photos. I have photos of a dorsal fin, and that's about it. My panicked, hold the shutter down, spray and pray with my camera into the water. I just have a dorsal fin and nothing else. But showed him that, and his first reaction was, well, I hope you weren't in the water. And so I had to admit, yes, I was the idiot in the water with no mask, not being as professional as I should have been. And he said, well, yeah, that's a tiger shark. We're here studying them because there's a lot of them. And it was a really eye-opening experience for me, because if that shark had wanted to do me harm, if she had wanted to cause problem, absolutely she would have. I would have either been in a hospital in Apia, which does not bode well, or not made it to the hospital. And so it was really interesting to sit back throughout that shoot. That was day one of a week-long shoot. I had to be in the water every day the rest of that shoot. Day two was really hard, getting off the boat. I brought my mask that time. But as the week progressed, I kind of got over the shakes every time I got into the water and just realized that at the end of the day, we're in their space. I brought a camera, which cameras, I found out later on, things we don't think of growing in Montana. The cameras emit kind of a little electronic charge that will draw sharks in. They're intrigued by this. And so she was just checking out this funny looking thing that's kind of drawing her into her space, and then let me go. It was not a problem on her end. And that was really humbling. I think especially traveling to visit outdoor spaces and places, it's a very good reminder of where we fit in the world and in these different landscapes, be it the South Pacific or the Bob Marshall, wherever we tend to go. We're up there on the food chain. It's rare that we're highest, be that kind of a human food chain as we interact with different humans, or an actual food chain. But I think that's the beautiful thing about spending time outside, hunting, fishing, shooting photos. It's a very humbling experience and takes us back to those bare, basic human elements that we often don't get to experience.
Beautiful. On that note, I wanted to share with whoever's listening out there that humans kill about 100 million sharks per year. And sharks kill on average 2 to 4 people a year.
Wow.
And I know many people who don't go into the ocean because they think they're going to be one of those people. But I encourage you to listen to the words of Eleanor Roosevelt. She said, do one thing every day that scares you. Mm-hmm. And the next time you're at the ocean and the opportunity arises, if you're scared, I encourage you to sit with that fear, but don't let it cage you in, because the ocean is a phenomenal place, and truly the chances of getting eaten by a shark are very slim. For me, I feel like that would be an honor, but that's kind of a weird perspective that I have.
I agree. Like I said, I thought about, okay, what will the newspaper headline? It seems a much better way to go out than being hit by a car or something that will probably kill the rest of us. So.
Yeah. But many sharks are keystone species, and I feel like that could be another interview on its own. Maybe Jess and I can meet up in Australia and continue this discussion on sharks and how special they are and how long they've been around for. Mm-hmm. But Jess, as that Canada goose squawks on the other side of the river, it's time for us to wrap up this show, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time and energy to join me on the Trail Less Traveled.
Thanks so much for having me, Mandela, and I will look forward to the next one, wherever it is, hopefully Australia.
Let's end your show with 3 bits of conservation advice that you'd like to share with the fishing community.
Conservation advice. Along the lines of what we were just talking about, explore a landscape or a place, a space that maybe you're less familiar with. For me as a Montana kid, it's working in the ocean. Anytime I have an opportunity to go to saltwater instead of freshwater, it's like I'm that kid in 2nd grade doing a report on dolphins again. It's an exciting experience to learn, and I think that keeps us thinking and engaged in our spaces. It will change the way you view your familiar spaces as well, which is a really powerful thing. I would also say take a friend with you. It's not always possible on the bigger trips, but as we head into spring here in Missoula, we talked earlier about taking a friend fishing, heading out on the water fishing with friends, and maybe take someone who hasn't held a fly rod before. Rig up a spare fly rod, bring a 6-pack of beer and a dinner, and just let them go to the water and try something new. They may hate it, and that's absolutely fine, but they will have experienced something new and different, and you potentially could have made a fishing buddy, which is never a bad thing. And I think 3, I would just say appreciate the spaces that we're in. I know for myself, I grew up in Montana. I left and swore I would never come back. I was kind of mentally done with Montana, which is a very strange thing to say now. It's an incredible place. I do feel like I won't be here forever. The road is calling. There are many other places out there that are incredible. And that knowledge that, okay, a move is looming sometime in the future is really making me appreciate the area around Missoula and Montana as a whole that much more. So appreciate what you have while you have it, because things do change. As we've all seen in the past several years, things are changing fairly rapidly these days. So walk away from that computer at 5 o'clock when you should, pull yourself away from your phone, turn off your TV, get outside and enjoy the spaces, especially as we head into spring and summer in Montana.
Namaste Missoula, Mandela here, your host of the Trail Less Traveled, the Trail 1033's locally harvested adventure radio series, which premieres every Sunday night from 6 to 7 Mountain Time. You can stream the show live online at trail1033.com. And remember, if you missed the premiere, it's also a podcast, available everywhere. You can follow the adventure as it unfolds by visiting the official website, which hosts the full show archive of over 600 episodes, by visiting traillesstravel.net. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank a small family business based in Missoula, Montana, with roots in Africa, Explore Maps. That's it for this week's adventure, my friends in Missoula and around the world. But until next week, please remember, living in Missoula with access to public lands and waters is certainly a privilege. And with privilege comes responsibility. Please get informed, get engaged, and speak up on behalf of wildlife and wild places.